not think that video games belong in a museum. But as time passes, it becomes totally clear that these are not just a passing fad. Rather, video games have become ubiquitous in our lives and have as much potential to tell us about our history and culture as any other artifact, like Benjamin Franklin's walking stick or Abraham Lincoln's pocket watch. But the question is, what exactly are they telling us? What do video games say about American history? To help us answer this question, we're here today with Drew Robarge, who is a museum specialist in the Division of Medicine and Science. And we're actually going to be taking a look at a game that you've probably played before. I know I was doing it when I was in middle school. It's Tetris.
In the game, Tetris comes from the Greek word for four, and all 7 shapes in the game have 4 blocks. It was created in the Soviet Union in 1984 by Alexei Adminov. He created this game where he worked. He distributed it to his other co-workers, and they start playing it, and obviously it's a huge time waster for them. And so one person in the office sends the game to his friend programmers in Hungary, and by happenstance, a person from England came and saw the game and said, we need to have it. And so this begins the long, difficult process of negotiating the rights to sell the game outside the Soviet Union. And this was the first electronic software to be exported from the USSR. So it was all new territory for the USSR. And so people didn't know who they had to negotiate with, who actually had the rights. Eventually, one person got the licensing rights to the Game Boy version, Hank Rogers. He saw the game at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1988, and he thought, wow, this will be perfect to make it to be played on the go. You know, you have 5 minutes, you have an hour, you can play it. And so
it's a very early version of cell phone apps.
Yes, this is the very, this is before Angry Bird, before Candy Crush. This was Tetris, and it's still very relevant today. You can still download it on any mobile phone.
So this is really interesting because obviously the culture that it's coming out of is clearly still playing a really big role even as it comes to North America. So the story stays the same. Basically,
they put a lot of the Russian Soviet elements into the game to kind of set up this notion of this uniqueness, this foreignness of the game. Look, here it comes from the Cold War. Like, you're playing the first game that came out of Russia. Look how unique it is. But the thing is, you could package it a different way and nobody would know the difference. Right. But they really wanted to latch onto the Soviet story. And this was a time when the Cold War was not quite over yet. I mean, there's a lot of changes going on, but the Berlin Wall hadn't fallen yet when this was all marketed.
Right. So it's really part of their advertising is really capitalizing, for lack of a better word, on this foreign policy tension issue.
When you finish, you get enough points, then you launch a rocket. In reference, and it's reference to the space competition. And depending on how many points you get, if you meet the minimum, then you launch a really small rocket. Then if you get higher, then you launch the space shuttle. In the Game Boy version, the game had 3 types of music you could pick from. So the most popular one is Type A. That is the instrumental arrangement of a Russian folk song. But it's so familiar to so many people. Now when people hear it, it's called a Tetris song. And I sometimes hum it in my head. So, and a lot of games, if it's around a year after, it's still being talked about a year after, that's a huge success, much less 30 years, So this was a game, first and foremost. So it's just a vehicle for culture. People play it not because it's Russian or Soviet. It's because it's a fun game.
Well, cool. This is fascinating. I had absolutely no idea that I was engaging in some sort of long-term generational cultural experiment by playing on my TI-83. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these stories. This is really cool. And thank you all for joining us again today, and we hope to see you next time.